The film begins with the introduction of a doctor named Anton, who commutes between his home in Denmark and his work in a Sudanese refugee camp. In Sudan, he helps an underprivileged community made up of mostly women and children. These people are oppressed by starvation and the violence of mercenaries under the command of a tyrant known as the Big Man. In the next scene, we see a boy named Christian reciting a poem at his mother's funeral. Following the passing of his mother's death from cancer, Christian and his father, Klaus, have recently relocated to the Danish village where Klaus grew up. Meanwhile, Christian appears to be estranged from his father and has isolated himself as a result of his mother's death. The following day, Christian attends his first day of school, and his first impression is witnessing a boy named Elias being bullied by older students. Later in the class, he's introduced to the other students by his teacher. He's then placed next to Elias, and the two quickly become friends. After school, Elias discovers that the bullies have sliced his bicycle tires. Christian sees this as well and feels that Elias should not stay quiet and allow these bullies to torment him. Therefore, he tries to retaliate against the bullies by slashing their tires. But just then, the bullies show up with their leader named Sophus. After realizing that Christian was messing with his bicycle, Sophus hits him hard in the face and walks away. Later that evening, Klaus tells Christian that he found blood on his shirt and asks if someone punched him. However, Christian claims that he simply fell while playing soccer and got injured. The next day, Anton returns from Sudan, and it turns out he's Elias's father. He and his wife, Marianne, are currently in the midst of a divorce due to an affair Anton had with another woman, and because of that, they now live separately. Meanwhile, Marianne and Anton approach the school teachers and complain about Sophus's frequent bullying of Elias. However, the teachers do not appear to acknowledge the bullying and claim that Elias must have been troubled at home. When the teacher implies that this may be due to his parents' divorce, Marianne gets furious. She urges them not to interfere in other people's personal affairs and also threatens to change the school if the bullying continues. However, Anton manages to calm her down and they leave from there. The next morning, Christian arrives at school and once again notices Elias being bullied by Sophus and his friends. Later, when Elias goes to the restroom to clean himself, Sophus follows him inside and asks him not to tell the teachers about this. Just then, Christian appears out of nowhere, shoves Sophus to the ground, and mercilessly beats him with a bicycle pump. He then holds a knife to Sophus's throat and threatens to kill him if he ever bullies anyone else. Then Elias and Christian rush away while the injured Sophus slowly rises to his feet, coughing and weeping. Next, Sophus is transported to the hospital, and Elias and Christian's parents are summoned to the school to address the situation. The officer interrogates both boys about the knife, but they claim Christian attacked Sophus with a bike pump, and there was no knife involved. They claim that Sophus was bullying them and that they had only acted out of self-defense. While going home, Elias tells his mother that the police had told him about Sophus being blind, but she assures him that Sophus is fine and will only have a headache and a minor scar on his face. In the next scene, Sophus returns to school following his recovery, and the three of them are summoned to the principal's office. Then the principal orders them to apologize to one another and shake hands, vowing not to fight again in the future. After that, Elias and Christian find the knife they'd hidden in the school, and Christian lets Elias keep the knife. Next, Anton takes the kids out to get some ice cream, and moments later, he notices his younger son arguing with another boy over his swing, and he quickly separates the two. However, a man named Lars shows up and pushes Anton back, telling him not to touch his son. Anton tries to assure him that there's nothing to worry about, but Lars yells at him and repeatedly slaps him. Lars then drags his son away while cursing at him for getting into trouble. Seeing this, Elias and Christian advise Anton to call the cops, but Anton insists that he's fine and that there's no need to make a huge issue out of it. That evening, Christian and Elias go to the roof of a nearby tall tower, and they notice Lars from there. They immediately rush to his car and copy his phone number to seek out the address online. Meanwhile, Lars notices the kids and approaches them while screaming, but luckily, they manage to flee in time. Elias then goes to his father and gives him Lars's address, asking him to beat him up, but Anton claims that he doesn't want to go to jail and that violence only leads to more violence. To teach the kids that violence is not always the answer, Anton takes the kids to Lars's workplace the next day. He asks Lars why he hit him the day before, but Lars becomes even more aggressive and starts insulting him. They have a furious argument, and Lars hits Anton once again. Despite this, Anton maintains his composure and walks away with the kids. After this incident, Anton goes back to Sudan for his work. Meanwhile, Elias and Christian continue to hang out on the roof, discussing that they need to do something about Lars. One afternoon, while working on a project, Christian accidentally discovers some discarded fireworks at his home. He shows it to Elias and says that it can even blow up a house. He then devises a plan to make a bomb out of it and take revenge on Lars for humiliating humiliating Anton. Elias is hesitant and believes it's risky, but he eventually agrees to go along with it. Following that, they look for a manual on the internet and use gunpowder to create a bomb. After several attempts, the boys eventually blow up the model lighthouse. When Christian explains his plan to blow up Lars's car, Elias gets scared just listening to it. Elias believes the cars are very expensive and that they could get into serious trouble. Hearing this, Christian becomes upset and demands that Elias return his knife right now if he does not intend to go with the plan. Meanwhile, in Sudan, two men carry an injured woman who has a huge wound on her torso and is covered in blood. Anton operates on her with the help of other nurses. He then informs the woman's husband that she survived the operation and that now they must wait and see. The husband says that many mercenaries arrived in cars and that his wife was unable to run quickly. She was then attacked by their leader, known as Big Man, who slashed open her abdomen to check if she was pregnant with a boy or a girl. Two more ladies had instantly died as a result of their injuries. The man says that the mercenaries gamble on the fetus's gender and then cut up the mother to check it. On the other hand, Elias is caught in a dilemma between whether or not to support Christian in his plan. He then takes out the knife and tries to sneak out of the house to return it, but his mother notices him. After discovering the knife, she yells at him and asks whether he'd used a knife to assault Sophus. The next morning, she goes to Christian's house and tells his father about the knife. Following this, Christian's father asked him if he used the knife to harm another boy, but Christian becomes enraged and asks his father whether he's sleeping with Elias's mother. He then accuses his father of lying to him about his mother's condition in the late stages of her disease. He argues that his father wanted his mother to die and storms out of the room. Later, Elias approaches Christian in school and swears that he didn't tell his mother about the knife, but Christian asks him to leave him alone and not contact him ever again. Back in Sudan, several men holding assault rifles arrive at the camp, and the women are seen running for cover with their children. Just then, a mercenary arrives and takes Anton in front of their leader, who's the infamous Big Man. He has a huge cut on his leg with dried blood and maggots crawling out of it. He tells Anton that he does not want his leg cut and requests that he fix his leg. However, Anton states that he's willing to treat him, but the weapons and cars must be kept a long distance away from the camp, to which the Big Man agrees. When the Big Man enters inside, a guy informs Anton that he's the one who cut the pregnant woman and should not be treated. The nurses also refuse to treat him, but despite this, Anton decides to fulfill his duty as a doctor and treats the man himself. The following day, the Big Man's wound is still partially open, and Anton informs him that he has a serious infection. The Big Man then extends an invitation to become friends and says he has powerful allies, but Anton refuses him and walks away. In the next scene, the nurses encircle a woman being carried on a stretcher, and Anton continues to press on her chest. One of the men advises him to stop trying to apply pressure as she's already dead. He eventually gives in, and the nurse drapes a blanket over her lifeless body. Moments later, the Big Man arrives with his two friends and makes a vulgar remark about a dead girl's genitalia. He then says that his friend wants to have sex with her since he enjoys things that don't move. Hearing this, Anton finally loses his composure and shoves the Big Man to the ground, demanding that he leave immediately. The villagers also gather at the scene and drag the Big Man away and start to kick and whip him. Later that night, Elias calls Anton to inform him of Christian's plan to explode the car. However, Anton is disturbed by today's events, and the internet connection is also poor, so he doesn't pay attention to Elias's words and hangs up the call. Later, Elias visits Christian's house and agrees to join in his plan. They then decide to detonate the explosives early Sunday morning so that no one gets wounded. Now, the boys make all the necessary preparations and place the bomb underneath Lars's car. They then light the fire and walk off into the distance. But moments later, they spot a woman and a girl approaching the car. Elias sees this and yells at them to run and rushes towards them. Just then, the car explodes and turns over, and we see Christian running toward the blazing car and the injured Elias lying face down on the ground. Elias is immediately rushed to the hospital while Christian is being questioned by the police. He claims that he did everything on his own and that no one else was engaged. Meanwhile, Anton also receives a phone call regarding his son and rushes from Sudan. Late that evening, Christian goes to see Elias in the hospital. When Marianne sees him, she becomes infuriated and begins to blame him for the incident. She then grabs his neck and shoves him up against a wall, claiming that he killed her son. Just then, when a nurse arrives and separates them, Christian flees the scene. In the next scene, the doctor informs Marianne that Elias is no longer in danger and will feel better soon. Anton also arrives sometime later, and when Elias awakens, he tells his parents not to blame Christian and that it was all his fault. That evening, Marianne receives a phone call from Christian's father, informing them that Christian has gone missing. They then call the cops and begin searching for him everywhere. Meanwhile, Christian is on his way to the building's roof to commit suicide after assuming that Elias is now dead. After some time, Anton eventually appears on the roof and urges Christian to step back. He informs Christian that Elias is no longer in danger and that he'll be all right. Hearing this, he feels relieved and finally steps back while breaking down in tears. The movie then concludes with Christian visiting Elias in the hospital, where they blissfully reconcile.